we produce a par roster, and it's for educational and entertainment purposes only. It, our channel is all about learning how to build websites, use AI graphic design, how to create YouTube content, statistical analysis, how to do side hustles, domain research. We do cover the topics of fantasy play against friends and rivals, but we do not and explicitly will not promote any sort of wagering or form of gambling. That is not what this site is about. So we just like to disclaim that, and then we'll show you. Basically, we produce a par roster, which is we're trying to toy around with statistical analysis, and in particular standard deviations from the mean, and how to create lineups that are more robust than what are presented in many of the websites. We do have a website called twager.com. This is where we place the rosters at, and you're welcome to go pick up a roster. You just click on the FedEx St. Jude roster, or you can click on the download. So the par roster is what we call a pro analytical roster, and it's basically we use a number of different statistical analysis that we pull into the roster. This particular video, we're going to show how to pull things in, how we use Grok and different artificial intelligence to pull statistical information into the roster, and then to use Excel spreadsheets to run mathematical processes, which basically calculate all of the stats that we gather together and then come up with what we call a par score. The par score is basically the difference between how we rate players and how other mainstream wagering sites and daily fantasy places rate players. So it gives you an idea of how to do statistics and how to learn the difference between those. So for this roster here, this week's roster is the St. Jude. What we did is we broke all the players down, and we picked the top 10 players and put that in green for players that we think are severely underrated by the various wagering sites. This particular roster came from DraftKings. It's as you can see, the green rated golfers, we produce a par score. The lower the par score, the better, just like golf. This is a golf event. So a par score of a -3 would be better than a score of 6.83. As you can see, Scotty's par score was -3. Rory's was 6.8. So we basically produce that into a ranking. So each and every single player gets a ranking. They get a par score and a ranking. So the number one ranked score this week is Ricky Castillo, and that is because he produced a -10 degree of separation from what the DraftKings valued him at. And what our statistical analysis proved is that where his salary ranking is not correct. So, and that's the measurement. So what we do, and what we're going to do today, is we're going to play around. We went out to Grok, and basically we create our YouTube content here. We do a lot of different things, but one of the things that we pulled in here is using a company. We were looking at this website here. for the FedEx St. Jude Championship, and noticing that there's different items such as page views, that you can basically sort those by the number of different views, which could be helpful. But what we found more helpful was the FedEx ratings. I think it comes into play, and it could be something that we want to build into our statistical calculations. So what we did is we went over to Grok, said, "Hey Grok, we want you to right here." We said, "Scrape content using RPA." RPA is robotic process automation. Basically, we send Grok out. We tell it to, "Hey, pull this information from the web, put it in a usable format, and return it to us in that same format," which is an Excel spreadsheet. In this case, we're using CSV, which is comma separated value, basically is a Excel readable format. So we asked it to go out to this fields page. There's a column called views and one called FedEx, which is a FedEx ranking of all the players. Can you pull the data into our PAR roster? So we uploaded our PAR roster. We basically gave Grok this PAR roster. We said, "Hey, Grok, I'm going to send you up a PAR roster. What I want you to do for me is to scrape some data, return it, add a couple of columns, which will be G and H." And in this case, Grok came back and basically said, "No, we can pull in the FedEx Cup standings basically, but we can't pull in the page traffic because it's specific to the website," which is fine. It produced an error, but it did. In this case, we just want to show the utility. We're not necessarily after the data itself, because and basically what it does, it returns this code. It's really not code. It's called comma separated value, but it's a precursor to an Excel web page. So what we do is we copy it, and we bring up Notepad. So you can type in Notepad if you have it on your computer. And basically what Notepad does, we can save this in a format. We'll paste it into Notepad, and we'll file. We're going to save it as, and what we want to add is this, we're just going to call this FedEx, FedEx, all in capital, underscore rank. But we want to put .csv. That's very, very important. If you don't put .csv, when you save it, Excel doesn't know to bring it up. And this is going to come into play later. But anyway, we're saving that file. We go out to Excel, and we want to pull up the information. We go to File, wherever we saved it at. It's probably in our folders. Downloads. We'll go by date modified so we can find it. Let's see where we saved it at. Hold on one second here. We'll save it. File. Save as. We saved it in our T wager. Okay. So that's where it's at. Let's go to the T wager. Date modified, it'll pull it to the top. Here's our FedEx rank. We pull this up, and basically, so now we have the same PAR roster that we had previously. Of course, it doesn't have all the markups that we use, but the point being is that we pulled in the FedEx rank, and Grok was able to maintain the same salary ranking and so forth that we already had in place. So we're not disturbing we're not having them totally re-rank all the players and list, in 1, 2, 3 order. So what we can do with this, the page views we weren't able to get. So like I said, it didn't want to pull those in. We can just right click and delete that whole column. But if this was a mathematical formula and you wanted to somehow pull this into our par ranking system, you might do a little math here. You might say, okay, well, currently Scotty's par score is 3.15 minus 3.15, and he's ranked number 1. So we can inverse this and put, we can basically do an inverse ranking and do some math there and pull in. So if we added just 1 to his score, but we added 2 to the next guy, and this is theoretical. Obviously, I'm not doing the math. I'm showing how to do the math. This is not anything that's going to provide any value other than showing you that you can go out and get statistics, do your own mathematical formulas. You could put that as 0.1. You can convert that to a smaller amount so it didn't make as big of an effect on the bar score. But basically, you go up to formulas. You can go to recently used, or you can just you can spell out what you want to do, like subtract. So in this case, if you start spelling out subtract, it basically pulls up the all of the functions that use that subtraction. So let's go here. This is the one that we use. So the first number, if you click on the par score right here, and then you go to the second number and pull the 1, it'll basically take him down to a minus 4.1. But if you carry that throughout, basically you can do the same math on every single player, and it'll pull those 2 columns together, basically. So we highlight the entire row, and it does the math for every single player. So in this case, that's an inverse correlation. Obviously, Scotty being, in fact, we would want to add that to his score to make it. This would actually make it more. Let's do some addition here. So we'll delete this whole column. Start over. Formula. We're just going to do a simple addition. We're going to add. It's a sum. So if you want to type in sum, it would bring it up. But basically, we've already used it. So we go OK, sum. So we're going to add. And the first, we click on this score, and then we click on number 2 that we want to add is this score. We hit OK. So now this will be a much more clear. This will actually have some bearing because what we'll see is the lower the par score, the better. And then those rankings will basically take these players, some of them into infinity, but other ones, well, we won't say infinity, but very high. Scotty remained at minus 0.2. So he obviously, because he's the FedEx leader, he has more FedEx points. He is the strongest player. But then it skips some. You'll see, salary-wise, the next strongest player would be this one. So you could put X by there. You could put an X by there. But the point being here is we're not really using the math to decide anything. We're showing you the math, how the math works, and how to use spreadsheets, and how to, once you do a calculation, that little trick of pulling down the box and having that calculation go through the entire spreadsheet. So like I said, our metrics that are already built into the par score are 10,000 different simulations, robotic process automation, and statistical analysis already built in. But if you wanted to add is the point. One other thing that we might look at, sometimes when you build rosters, uh, like if you have a lineup in your fantasy league, say, and the lineups are not really they don't appear real neat and clean as far as a spreadsheet, but you want to basically pull all these lineups up and compare them because uh, there's one little piece of information here which is interesting. Is the FPPG, which is fantasy points per game. That's a real good measurement of how players, uh, their abilities, their fantasy points per game is higher if they make the cuts, and if they finish very high, obviously they're rewarded with more fantasy points. So what you can do here is you can copy. So you left click the mouse, hold it, and you basically go through this roster, highlight the whole thing, right click, copy. We're going to take this out to a spreadsheet, a blank one, or in this case, I already have one that's prepared, but I've done this before. And you basically click in the first box, right click again, and paste that into the. And what you'll see is it'll produce this line of the player, their fantasy points per game. It puts in a little G. That means they're a golfer, basically. It's useless information, but it doesn't matter that it's useless information because you can run this mathematical formula again, which is what we're doing. We're using spreadsheets to run mathematical formulas. But we go over to the top of the page, click on formulas again in our data bar or data. Recently used, we use sum a lot because we're just going to kind of add up. We want to see who's got the most. And what you can do on this one is you can highlight from B all the way down to numbered box 23. And basically it'll give us that number. And the beauty of this is, so you can see, you can compare, well, this lineup has a total of 473 fantasy points. This lineup has a total of 468. We can pop back into our little, this lineup here, this lineup, if we copy that one, left click, copy, we're going to paste it back over into our spreadsheet here, which we're using right here. C, we click on the C box, we right click, we hit the paste. And the beauty of this is once we get a couple of rosters, we can drag this formula over and it'll calculate for all of them. So basically I've got about 5 rosters. Let's do that real quickly. Let's pull every single one and then we'll show you the magic of you're using technology to do things for you in a more proficient manner. And this is a level that most casual people that have daily fantasy and compete against their buddies um, are not using. So if you want to compete against your friends in daily fantasy sports and you want to use this as an example, let's pull in another lineup. So we do the same thing. I'll do one more just to make it. We'll pull in one more, and then I'll show you the magic of using Excel to. I think we have another line. Let's see here. We'll page down a little bit here. Here's another lineup. So we just basically highlight it, holding the left mouse button down until we get to the bottom, and then we put our cursor right there at the end. We let up on the left click, we right click, we hit copy, and we take this back to our spreadsheet where we're working, right click, paste it in. So now we've got those. Let's see. Let's get another one. We'll do one more just for good measure here. And this one here, we like this lineup. We copy. We're going to do the same thing back. And we paste this one in. So, and now we don't have to go back through and do that same process where we go up and pull the formula. We can basically click on one of the formulas we've already done here, and we can, if you hold it in the lower right hand corner, you see the plus symbol. What you're doing is you're dragging that box all the way over and release the click, and then it does the math for you. And there you go. So you've got all these rosters here. You show one that's, wow, that the total fantasy points there is 473 if I go with that roster. But if I go with this one down here, this roster, it's only 451 fantasy points. Now, obviously, this is not the best way to pick a roster, but it does give you an idea. If you're eliminating certain rosters, this might be the final decision point. If you're uh, wobbling between two rosters, it might be, well, this is the best one. But having that those functions in Excel spreadsheets makes the job much easier for you to do. And what you can do is after a contest is over, you can go get the player who had the best roster and find all the players and their fantasy points and plug it back in. So he might have had, uh, he might have had a total different roster, and you can see if there's a correlation between having the most fantasy points and winning rosters. I can already say that's probably not the case, but there is a strong correlation. And anytime you have a very strong correlation, that's what we're all about. In statistical analysis, we want the strongest correlation possible. And we refer to that as sigma. When you have a sigma, a lower sigma, the more you go into the sigma range, which is like a bell-shaped curve, you're starting to get out of the possibility of chance, and you're more into the probability stage. And that's what statistics is all about. You want to pull in probability, and that's why we build these rosters. So we show the probability is all we're doing in our roster that we provide out on twager.com. We're trying to come up with probability and saying, well, the probability that DraftKings selected per salary the person that's most capable of producing in that salary range. So they're rated. You can also just call them rated 1 through, how many are there? So there's 1 through 71 as they're rated, but they have a measurement of that rating in the salary. So once they do that and they put a salary on a player, then they say his rating. So these are all tied. So the last three, that's not number 69, 70, and 71. And you'll see salary jumps sometimes. You'll see, they don't necessarily follow an exact pattern. There might be a bunch of them clumped up in one area. And we're saying, no, that's not correct. This particular golfer here, because we've gone out and researched what they have him rated at and what he cost his salary or his position is not correct to where he should be, and we place a number beside that. Uh, the the one that we find most egregious and most uh, deviation is this player here, and you see a lot this time. There's a lot of deviation in the lower end, which is a time to use caution, obviously, because uh, this is a no-cut event, so all the players will get to play to the end. So they will probably produce at their level, but we're saying their level should be higher. Uh, they should be ranked better. So the green are 1 through 10. The blue are 10 through 20. We don't rate the rest of them. You could do this on a different scale, like the number 68 player. We would say this person is uh, per salary is a it might be the worst producing according to our statistical analysis. Uh, that might not necessarily be the case, but we don't have to decide that. We only have to find the very best. We don't really need to decide if they are the worst performing because it won't matter to us. So we're just proving that they are their statistical analysis is off. Is basically, and we're using math to do that in a fun way. And like I said, we used Grok today, and we showed you how to how to convert a CSV. And it shows you the limitations of robotic process automation and what Grok can do. Uh, it can't just look at a page, and if you're using true robotic process automation, you can look at a page and draw in inferences from what exists on the web page. That's the big difference between Grok. Grok only can draw information that exists somewhere in a data bank, and it can't look at a page and infer from it and pull in data at this point. I think at some point it will probably be able to do robotic process automation because the companies that provide that service will probably add it as a component into the Grok architecture. It's like Microsoft and Excel and all the different programs that Microsoft owns were once at one time individual parts and pieces of like Outlook and Word and PowerPoint and different. There were basically and each one of those programs inside itself are a number of different programs that were added. I feel like Grok and ChatGPT, perhaps to some degree, the difference between Grok and ChatGPT is Grok is up to the date. So if you're asking it information about today's FedEx challenge and you ask ChatGPT, it's going to say, "Well, I don't have the ability to render anything, that's not a year old, and I don't know what the cutoff is. I don't think it's a year, but what I'm saying is they can't do real time, whereas Grok can, and that's why we use Grok as our we use it to design different web pages and to do our graphic work. And it's a extremely useful tool. You can see some of our prediction models and different things. We mathematical formulas. We still use our robotic process outside of this to pull in our simulations and so forth. But Grok has produced a lot of our graphics for us, and in fact, they've even improved their graphics to this point. And we'll just tell Grok, hey, I'm looking for. I would like for you to produce um, our YouTube description, our YouTube title, our YouTube thumbnail. So all this is automatic. We don't have to spend a lot of time wasting time with creating graphics when we could be using it to for our statistical information pools, which is what we do. But anyway, I wanted this to be a short video. It's gotten a little longer, but it kind of shows how we work in the background of always trying to pull in information that might be useful. There are a number of different places, and these websites often provide all this information. But if you don't parse it and you don't apply it and use mathematical formulas in calculating the value of Scotty being ranked number one that's an extreme value currently, and the fact that you could actually put that in the math, and so I mean, you could go by the world rankings are different than Rory is number 12 in FedEx, but he's number 2 in the world golfer. So mathematically speaking, which one of those is a more accurate value and depiction? You pull that into your model and you calculate the numbers in the formula and you say, well, over time, we have discovered through statistical analysis that there's more correlation between one or the other. And you pack that into the formula as part of it. And it becomes, instead of being one little simple measurement, it becomes thousands and thousands of different data points that point toward a more accurate assessment. And that's why we do much better than some of these mom and pop YouTube channels and some of the major wagering and daily fantasy. You'll see a lot of times they'll pick 4 or 5 golfers by name recognition and say, well, this is who I like them because they have nice shoes and their putter is new and they're, they did good last week or whatever. And what we do is say, well, greens in regulation, fairways hit, blah, blah, blah. That's what we want. We want statistical information. We're going to compound that into a formula. Then we're going to make it available on the website. But after it's finished, we have something called the ACE engine, which is our accuracy correlation engine. So we basically take these, see how well we did, how well our pro analytical roster did, and then we set benchmarks and for each event, and we determine whether or not our roster is hitting those benchmarks. If it hits the benchmarks, then that's great. We don't need to make a lot of changes, but what we found just in a short number of events that this web channel is new. I'm not really I'm a statistical analysis guy and artificial intelligence. I work for a Fortune 500 company. So, in robotic process automation. So that's not my gig as YouTube channels and content. I'm not a good podcaster, but on the other end, what we do is we put these, we're starting to put these measurements together. But the point of that conversation was that the fact that the major tournaments are different than some of the other tournaments. Like the most recent tournament, the Wyndham had a huge divergence of players not in the top 20 who even made the cut or did very well at all. So Wyndham was one of those outliers, but we caught it. You look at our last video, we show how we picked 90% from the roster was from player number 20 down, which caught the bulk of the players that finished high. And it's because statistical analysis using the weather and the course and the player versus statistical analysis of, well, he's number 1 in FedEx. Well, yeah, but if you're not calculating the course, the weather, the conditions, the player, their social media, if they are staying up late or they had a sore wrist, or if they're all the social media needs to be pulling in as well to actually get a good correlation and a strong result. So our ACE engine basically verifies what we're already saying is that our rosters are, because we rank every single golfer and we're not trying to pull out 2 or 3 and say they're great because their shoes are white. We pull in stats. Well, we're going to leave